Shalom uvracha. I assume that I'm not the only person over years of davening on Yom Kippur who's developed a favorite part of davening. It's hard not to. And over the next few minutes, I want to talk about my favorite part of davening. And particularly, I want to talk about it because it was really a halacha or an idea that generated within me the emotion that I now associate with this part of davening. My choice for favorite part of davening on Yom Kippur is the Bracha of Shehechiyanu. And I want to explain to you why that is and how I feel the way I do, in hopes of seeing Yom Kippur, or being able to see Yom Kippur through a certain model. We all know that the emotions we're supposed to feel on Yom Kippur are complicated. Okay, major machlokas, whether simcha is noheg on the Yamim Noraim or only on the Shalosh Regalim, right? We paskin in the end, certainly Avelus is canceled by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and for the most part, that means that there must be simcha that's noheg, maybe not simcha yisera as the Rambam says, but some form of simcha. It's much easier to see that on Rosh Hashanah, when in fact we do eat basar and we do drink yain, than on Yom Kippur when we're fasting. It's hard to see it on Yom Kippur. And in fact, the Gemara in Eruvin, Daf Mem Amud Beis, has a discussion not about simcha on Yom Kippur, but much more about the Bracha of Shehechiyanu. But as we know, the Bracha of Shehechiyanu is very much connected to the idea of simcha, and to a certain extent is generated by the simcha that we're supposed to feel from time to time. Now, the Gemara has a discussion about, well, how do you make a Shehechiyanu without a kos? And the Gemara even suggests that maybe you could give it to a child. The Gemara rejects that because maybe children would think that you could drink or make kiddush on Yom Kippur. Okay, in the end, obviously, we make a bracha of Shehechiyanu without a kos. But where would the kos come from in the first place? Why would a bracha of Shehechiyanu need an object, need a kos shel bracha? We call it a kos shel bracha, but why is it necessary? So it turns out, when you think about it, Chazal sort of don't trust us to just make brachos on their own. Chazal want us to be holding something when we make a bracha. Okay? You'd think you could make brachos under a chuppah, but Chazal want us to be holding a kos. You'd think you could make brachos at a bris milah without a kos, and yet Chazal want us, right? You could bench without a kos, and yet Chazal, as if we need a point of focus or something that generates simcha or joy, Chazal want us to hold an object. Ad kidei kach, that we're much more comfortable making a Shehechiyanu on a fruit, which, let's be honest, doesn't really generate that much simcha, than we might be in another circumstance. When the state of Israel got its first F-35 from the United States, somebody asked a posek, do we make a Shehechiyanu? They said, well, it's a $50 million plane. Of course you would, or Hatov HaMeitiv. But you know what? If you're nervous, have the pilot wear a new shirt, right? We're attached to the Chefza Shel Mitzvah as if that's what generates the bracha, when in fact it doesn't. So now we're up to Yom Kippur. And the question is, without a kos, what generates the simcha? What allows us to make the bracha of Shehechiyanu on Yom Kippur night? The answer, I believe, is as follows. And the original idea is Rav Soloveitchik's, who pointed this out. And then the rest is, I think, just something that common sense that speaks to all of us. Chazal could have put the bracha of Shehechiyanu any place. Okay? But they put it in a context. What do we say before we make a Shehechiyanu? We say on Yom Kippur, V'nislach l'chol adat b'nei Yisrael v'lager hagar b'tocham ki l'chol ha'am bishkaga. We're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're asking Him for forgiveness for ourselves, but not just for ourselves as individuals, because we're part of Adat B'nei Yisrael. It's a magic moment where it's just us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then we say, Slachna la'avon ha'om hazeh ki godel chasdecha v'cha'ashen asat ha'om hazeh mitzrayim adheinu v'sham ne'amar v'yomer Hashem salachti kidvarecha. In that moment, our emotions are supposed to be triggered, not through an object, not through a mitzvah, just from the encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no intermediary at that moment. There's no kos. There's nothing else. The feeling of simcha has to be internally generated by each of us. Otherwise, the bracha doesn't make sense. And if there was ever a year where we're obligated to generate feelings internally, it's this year. Wherever we are, overwhelmingly likely, you're not davening in a packed shul. Maybe you're in somebody's backyard. The feeling has to come from us. We have to be able to realize that we're standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu naked. Nothing in between us. And we have the zchus to stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we have the zchus to beg Him to hear the words Salachti Kidvarecha. Hearing those words is supposed to generate in us a feeling of how lucky we are, despite all that's going on in the world. A feeling of pure emotion, a feeling of pure attachment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if we can say the Bracha of Shehechiyanu with the feeling of joy, despite what's going on, if we can genuinely feel connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a backyard or in an empty shul, then the sense you get is it really will be the case that we'll hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu say, Salachti Kidvarecha.